music too.
Well, welcome. Tonight we're going to go through a topic that is one of the most critical questions people should be asking in certain buildings, but probably one of the most under or non-understood areas. We have the world expert on the topic here. Why don't we start with an introduction?
Al, I'm delighted to be here. My name is Ritchie Shoemaker. I'm a physician from Maryland. Happy to be up in this gorgeous countryside. Beautiful, beautiful spot.
And?
Hi, I'm Joe Musto. I'm a scientist. I do a lot of work for the doctors who follow Dr. Shoemaker's protocol.
You know, it's funny because I remember here at the medical center, we've grown up from a little red hospital to a full-fledged regional medical center.
Mm-hmm.
And we always joke about what it was like when in Milford, you came in under 4 physicians. You know, Capisi, Cicchetti, Mastriani, all of us can trace ourselves back to 4. And it was old-fashioned medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And I always joke about, there was a little place called Pocomoke, Maryland, that I went down a few years ago, and it was deja now.
Yeah.
You know, I saw somebody practicing what I called old-fashioned medicine. It was Ritchie with his patients. A woman came in, he's talking about her son, the family. It really was a breath of fresh air in today's managed healthcare.
Yeah.
You know, and then we started down this road of TGF-beta.
The work that you did, I think you laughed at me a little bit looking in my waiting room because I had a sign that said, if you've been waiting for more than 20 minutes, ask for an explanation. Doesn't mean you get seen quicker, but it means it is one-on-one. And yet what I wanted was some lab to look at incredibly sophisticated measurements of a compound that we now know has extraordinarily health effects, not just acutely in so many different illnesses, but in chronic diseases it is absolutely huge. In your introduction you had a model of DNA, the old Watson-Crick model. Well, this TGF-beta 1 that you were instrumental in getting set up is keeping one lab in high dollars, but it has provided more insight into regulation of what we call genomics, looking at genes, and now they're turned on and turned off, but they're regulated in ways that we could not possibly have dreamed of. And because of you, and I'm ever thankful, I don't mind saying that to anybody, TV audience here or in New York, that you were the one that helped bring this test that exploded the field of inflammation that has been my life for 20 years.
Now, Richard, when people talk about a sick building, you know, let's take a step back and say, where do we start on this topic? Because too many times, what do you get from a physician? Oh, it must be an allergy. It must be something. You're just not sleeping enough.
One of the concerns is that in the 80s, the idea of a sick building was brought up. And that was supposed to tell us something. All it really said is there's something going on we don't understand. Lots of theories have come and gone. But what was sick was not the building, it was the people in the building. And we look at this dichotomy, there are building health measurements. Mm-hmm. What microbes are growing in areas of water intrusion that we shouldn't have? What microbes are growing where there's not water intrusion? There's no indoor environment without microbes.
Right.
And then we say, if you are in this building and you're exposed, as it turns out, based on the immune responses, maybe we have time to talk about it, 3/4 of people will say, this doesn't bother me a bit. Another 25% are saying, I'm tired. I can't think straight. My joints hurt and I've been worked up. It's not arthritis, it's not this, it's not that, but I still hurt. They thought I had Lyme disease, I don't. I thought I had this, I don't. And my digestion's not right. I have abdominal pain. My stomach doesn't empty. I get cramping and the shortness of breath, boy, I had a pulmonary function test and I thought I had asthma. It's not. It's restrictive lung disease, or gosh, the thickening, the area between the bronchial tubes and the blood vessels. It's too thick. Air doesn't move back and forth the way we want, and I can't function. So, person says, I'm going to go to my family physician, and they have 15 minutes on Thursday. And Mrs. Jones, how are you feeling? Well, I'm not feeling well. That's why I made this appointment. All right, what seems to be the problem? Well, I'm weak and tired. My muscles ache. I'm short of breath. I cough. I have abdominal pain. My joints are bad. I've trouble remembering where I was. My memory's bad. I have difficulty remembering anything I just did. And as far as confusion, boy, I got lost on the way here. I've been coming here for 25 years. And Mrs. Jones, are things tough at home since your husband's been laid off? Are you having some stress since your daughter-in-law was in that accident? She's been in the nursing home. And she walks out with what? Good medical care?
No.
So we go from ill-defined sick building to ill-defined sick people, and then, in large part, as I mentioned, because of you, I work internationally. Now, I say our because it's me and my buds. We can show you exactly what's wrong. We can follow the case definition from the U.S. Government Accountability Office in 2008 and the World Health Organization in 2009. We can give you chapter and verse. We can send you to the MRI facility and spend 10 minutes of MRI time of your brain with a test called NeuroQuant, FDA cleared since 2006, that gives us volume description of 11 discrete areas of the brain, and I can tell you in 10 seconds reading that report whether this is the fingerprint that you get from a water-damaged building, whether it's post-traumatic stress disorder, whether it's from post-Lyme syndrome, whether it's multinuclear atrophy. 10 seconds, and it cost $89. $89.
How many doctors know about this?
When our paper was published on first one in mold and NeuroQuant in 2014, there were about 20 facilities doing this test in regional centers. Mm-hmm. Now there's 600, but any MRI unit can do the test. Mm-hmm. You go to the cortex.net website, cortechs.net, and click on NeuroQuant. They'll give you the criteria, the machine settings.
But Ritchie, if like you say, I go to my physician, I'm tired, I'm achy. I mean, I know what he'd tell me. You're almost 60 years old, you're playing hockey with 18-year-olds, grow up, of course your body's achy. Where do I start? I mean, you mentioned if I go into a school, am I going to find moldy rooms? I mean, there's no sterile area anywhere that I know of. But where do we start? Let's take a step back, and how do I know, or how do I even begin to suspect I have chronic mold issues?
It's easier than you think. In 2011, the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health published a paper that estimated that half of all buildings in the U.S. had water intrusion that wasn't cleaned up within 2 days, and therefore had microbial growth. That potential for exposure is what you need as your first step. If I'm in here in this building, which even though it looks like it might have a flat roof, doesn't bother me at all, I don't see anything, I bet I'll be fine here. We were in another building a little earlier today in Hopkinton, moldy as can be, and yet there it is, a medical facility open for business. So that water intrusion doesn't have to announce itself with 3 different mechanisms to say the building's bad, and that's water intrusion and visible mold, water intrusion and a diagnostic test, usually a DNA test called qPCR. The EPA put forth ERMI. Our group likes to make puns and bad jokes, so our test is called Hurts Me Too. Sounds like a song, doesn't it? That's where it comes from. But the third way is water intrusion and musty smells. If you have one of those 3, you have met the first tier. Then we look to see, all right, do I have a multi-system, multi-symptom illness? I mentioned Mrs. Jones, who rattled off 15 symptoms in 1 minute, and you correctly stopped me. She could have gone on for 3 more. So the mean or the average number of symptoms of cases published in peer-reviewed literature, back in 2013 we had 1,829 patients and 500 controls, mean number of symptoms is 20.1. For children, it's 12.2. The children is less than 18. And these have been uniform numbers reported since we started screening in 2002. And then if you meet that criterion, understanding that's not differential diagnosis, there could be many other things. You could have 4 problems. Maybe you're beating up all those 18-year-olds too bad on the hockey rink, that's why your elbows are hurting, your shoulders are bad. And maybe nothing else is wrong. But if you then say the labs are the same as published in peer-reviewed published literature and in high-level literature, you can say, what's your TGF-beta 1? What's your MSH? What is your C4A? All of these tests are covered by insurances, and well, who knows if every new insurance will do that or not. But if I walk in with the printout from our Surviving Mold website that says physician's order sheet and says, I want the immune response genes, remember the genetic susceptibility, HLA, I want MSH, I want TGF-beta 1, I want MMP9, I want VEGF, I want gliadin, and I want a nasal culture for unusual organisms that only grow in MSH deficiency. The ladies can say, are you Blue Cross Blue Shield or Quest? Okay, these are all covered, we'll send these off. And then 2 weeks later, here comes the diagnostic labs that as a group will not hide. It'll be obvious in 2 weeks, but you've got to get the order. You've got to have the education to know, quite frankly, more than some physicians, because some physicians think that mold and bacteria and actinomycetes and the other organisms that live inside water damaged buildings, they think these are warm fuzzies.
Yeah, they think they're benign.
But they're not.
Now, I'm an employee. I mean, I look at it from 2 sides. As an employee, I come in, it's like when I go down to the basement, if I smell musty, I know I got a problem.
Right.
And I got to deal with it. It's my home, I'm spending a third of my life in it, but I'm in a building. I work here. Okay. I smell, if I smell mold or must, okay, but if I don't see, because you know, what happens is these new tiles are so efficient that you get a little bit of water, you get a stain, facilities come in, they flip the tile, all is well with the world. But I wonder, what's behind the tiles?
If you take it a step further and say, we had ice dams last winter,
Yes.
800 feet of snow weekly in Boston, maybe you didn't have that much.
It felt that way.
It all felt that way.
Yeah.
So who didn't have a problem with water melting under those environmental conditions, and were you actually paying attention to the back part of the garage that shares air with the inside of your home?
Well, I can tell you it cost me $25,000 because we did have ice dams. The water backed up into my wife's library, which then we had to rip out all of the ceiling and the walls in the 4th bay of our garage, and all of her floor and all of her cabinets.
Not that beautiful bamboo floor.
Yeah. We have a new one now.
Okay.
A new one.
I was worried about that.
Yeah, no, she had a new one put in, but I mean, realistically, the minute we saw mold, we didn't want to take a chance.
You are educated and sophisticated. You're also part of the finance committee of this town. You told me something dramatic that we don't do in Maryland, we don't do in North Carolina or Virginia, and that is to say, we are going to maintain our public buildings so we never get to the point that there is a leaky roof and the kindergarten pod is now moldy as can be, and someone says you got to close it down. Big post office in Princess Anne closed down. There it was, front page of the paper. Well, I've been going to that post office for years and telling them there's a problem, and they ignored it. What made the difference is someone got sick. So the issue is, how do you know? It starts with education. And then the next bit of question is, if there is water intrusion in a basement, we all know that that's a problem. But we've got people with basements that have in-ground sump pumps and mechanisms to take care of water after it comes in through the in-ground side of one.
Well, how do you ever dry it out?
Excuse me?
How does it get dried out?
It doesn't. You create the microenvironment and you might take care of the standing water, but the humidity is such that as soon as that goes over 55 to 60%, you'll start having growth of these
Have
microbes.
an incubator.
Now, bacteria like 90% water saturation, or AW is the fancy term. But we see HVAC systems that are installed in crawl spaces. And the crawl space is just some soil, and there might be a little bit of plastic slapped up somewhere. But you've got an air handler, and then now we've got a flexible fiberglass duct that when it's brand new look pretty good, and you suspend it from a joist and suspend it from a joist, and you come back 3 months later and now you see sagging between the joist
All the
hangers.
condensation.
And the condensation now has a valley to settle in. And then we look at particulates that are always in air that are adsorbed onto little teeny tiny fiberglass fibers, and now we've got food and moisture, and now the stretching of that flexible fiberglass lets material and bioaerosols from the soil and the air above it get sucked into the air and entrained, and now you've got silent mold growth in your ductwork. And where does the mold and its byproducts go? It goes to your living room and your bedroom and your pregnant daughter's room while she's waiting for little Johnny
Well,
to
I
come
mean,
along.
let's face it, even in New England, true New Englanders will tell you, we don't need high vac, we don't need air conditioning. Yeah, I'm too old for this. I mean,
Absolutely.
down Maryland, we were there, nobody questioned it. But you put in a high vac, not a high vac, but in a home, an air conditioning system. Let's face it, you're going to have ductwork. You're going to have the air handler. What do you do if you say, I want to be an educated homeowner and do the best I can? I can't run chlorine gas through it. It's not like, I'm going to put a bubble over my house and gas it. What do I do?
And just to follow that point, remember when the anthrax scare was in a couple of the Senate buildings, chlorine dioxide was run to kill anthrax.
You put a bag
If
over
you
it.
kill a mold, or a fragment of a mold, 99% of what makes people sick are fragments, not just the molds. Molds are really a small part of this, bacteria and actinomycetes. You can put all the chlorine gas you want, you won't kill what's already dead.
Right.
So the question is, how do I know that I need to filter the air? Well, number one, for $125, it's not free, but it's not $1,200, you can do on your own a collection of dust in 2 areas of your home, vacuum a rug 3 feet by 6 feet here, there, take a Swiffer cloth, the one we get from Walmart, and wipe over 10 horizontal surfaces, left to right or right to left, but not back and forth, we don't rub, but 10 surfaces to 20, send it off to the lab, $125 later, you say, do I have water saturation of 60 to 80%? That'll let Wallemia grow. Do I have 80 to 90%? That lets 2 special Aspergillus molds grow. Do I have 90 to 100%? Oops, Stachybotrys, the dreaded black mold. Probably one of the least of all of our problems, gets all the publicity. There's a good marketing firm for Stachybotrys, but Chetomium is probably worse. But these are telling us 90 to 100%, that's an active leak. So I can sample and tell you the ecology of water saturation and therefore know what is growing inside this environment. Just think about the ecology of a home. 60 degrees maybe, 75 degrees, year round, 24/7. Boy, that's like San Diego.
Yep.
And so what grows inside? If the winds don't blow, and remember the solution to pollution is dilution, you don't get sick from the pile of leaves outdoors, you don't get sick from the compost pile, because those materials are biological warfare like crazy, but not so in the niche that's driven by cellulose and gypsum inside. So understanding home dynamics, and if you've had a water leak and 2 days have gone by, you haven't cleaned it up, don't just lift the rug up off the crawl space or the basement after the flood. That rug is now saturated and needs to be removed. But an index of suspicion followed by a modicum of inexpensive testing, then we go to the health survey. Because just because you're exposed doesn't mean you're going to get sick. Now, if we find that you have genetic susceptibility, call it histocompatibility locus A or HLA, chromosome 6, and you've got one of the 6 kinds out of 54, 24% of the population, that statistically is found in 95+% of cases. It's not 100, but it's close. But if you've got susceptibility and low levels of a regulatory, how about this word, a neuropeptide, you're going to have an additional problem, and that is silently, deep in the nasopharynx and maybe in some of the jawbones as well, you'll find organisms that Dr. Musto has done fabulous work for. And if you have that organism and don't know it, you're not going to get better. But it doesn't cause symptoms. What? How can such a thing be true? Well, just think about it. If you have one organism that we've proved with genomics are a problem inside the nose, you think we might have some in the gut we haven't figured out yet. So this problem is early in its infancy as far as opportunistic commensal organisms. But you don't find these organisms in people with normal MSH and no evidence of inflammation. But if you find inflammation, the duty of the informed patient and the duty of the physician is to say, I have read peer-reviewed literature, I've read popular books too, that said if I have low MSH and HLA, I'm going to have C4A wrong. I'm going to have TGF-beta 1. Why don't I just do this on me? And Johnny now is born. Johnny is my daughter's son. Do you think the daughter's son might have some of her genes? If she's getting sick, why don't we look at Johnny? Why aren't we measuring these screening tests in every 3rd grader? Why aren't we looking at a test that takes 5 minutes of nursing time called visual contrast sensitivity that shows, this is hundreds of papers, shows a distinctive deficit with exposure to these biologically produced toxins. It's so simple. And yet, when I had a school system in Somerset County, Maryland, persuaded to do this, the state of Maryland says, if you put that test out, which would show the presence of a disease, your funding for the next school is cut off. True story. True story. No testing was allowed.
Now I'm confused. How?
The state did not want the information to come out. You said you're an employee. What if you owned that nice fancy company with a musty basement? Or how about the sub-basement where you park your car and the air return is in the sub-basement blowing particulates into the 4th floor? What if you're the employer? Do you want your employees to find out they've been sickened by your building?
No, but on the other hand, think of the exposure. I'd be more frightened that an employee does get sick, and then they come back and they find out it's the building. Now you're looking at a class action lawsuit.
If you don't test, you are negligent for failure to take the cudgel up to protect your employees. But if you hide the story and paint over the mold and say nothing's wrong, get a bogus lab to do the testing that comes back normal in face of people getting sick, then you do have negligence for failure to provide a safe
But now
workplace.
again, coming back to the first place, my home, what can I do? Is there any steps I can take? Because I'm certainly not going to be able to run a brush through all my ductwork.
Let's assume you don't have the $125 and you're not going to do the sampling that I suggested that you do.
But even
there's
if
a
you did,
problem.
Richie, and let's say it comes back positive.
Okay.
Now what? Is that a test you do, Joe?
No, we don't do that.
Okay.
We
So-
could do that. We do environmental testing. We definitely could do that.
But if I go to Surviving Mold website,
SurvivingMold.com.
survivingmold.com, I look and I take my wipes and I do it the right way, I send it off to somebody, and it comes back, I've got a problem. Now what do I do?
You then say, I'm going to walk around the outside of my house. I'm going to look for exposed roofing nails. I'm going to look for missing shingles. I'm going to look at my soffits underneath my downspouts to make sure they aren't rotted out. I'm going to make sure that my downspout isn't clogged. So I'm flooding water possibly back behind the cladding of the home. I'm going to look to see where the downspout goes and make sure that it's well away from my crawl space or my basement. I'm going to start in the basement and look for areas that might have visible mold that can smell musty. I'm going to look to see, is there groundwater intrusion on the in-ground side of a walkout basement, if you're built into a hill, and this is hilly country. I'm going to look to see, is there evidence of anything growing on the joists that support the subfloor of the first floor. Then I'm going to go up and I'm going to get my moisture meter that I rented for $25, and I'm going to look at the moisture content of the ribbon board that's all around on top of the foundation, and then I want to go upstairs. I'm going to look around all my doors. I'm going to look around under my windows for areas of 14 to 16% water saturation compared to 9% was what it should have. And if I find something, I'm going to mark those, and then I'm going to keep running looking, and I will look every 16 inches at a wall cavity. Let's assume it's a stick-built house and 2x4s are there. 16-inch centers are kind of standard. And I'm going to look to see what's water saturation at the top and the bottom. I've only spent $25 in less than an hour. Now I'm going to go up and I'm going to look on my second floor, the same kinds of things, and I'll be looking at our bathrooms. And I'm going to look to see right where the copper pipe comes up as the main feed into your shower before it breaks off into PVC or polybutylene or whatever they're using these days. Right at that T, that's where you find the pinhole leaks. And the house was built quickly. Boy, what was it? Hopkinton has grown to 16,000 people over the last few years. Now, if you're building a house that fast, because you're selling them fast, how many master plumbers are there working in Hopkinton? And not to pick on plumbers, not to pick on Hopkinton, but could someone who's not a master plumber have sweated that joint and not done it right? If they did do it right, then you go and you look to see no leaks in the plumbing, no leaks in the kitchen or any of the kitchen cabinet, the de-icing water supply works fine, or the refrigerator water supply. Then you go up and you say, hey, here's the pipe, the vent pipe from the master bathroom. It stops in the attic. It doesn't go through the roof. So where does the vent go? Where does that moisture go? Inside the attic. And then you look at someone, they've got fancy recessed lights. And if you go up above in the attic, you look to see all the light coming through. Those recessed lights don't have the same, say, insulation or protection that a regular ceiling fixture might have. And what's that mean? You're going to have to and fro sharing of air routinely. Look at the soffits, look at the gable ends. If you've got open areas of the gable ends, do they let in water? Look around chimneys. New England's got chimneys. And look to see, you're looking up in the attic, do you see light?
Is the flashing tight?
Is the flashing tight, or is it old? How about the ridge vent? The beautiful idea, this ventilate from eaves up the roof vent. How old is that? It's still working? You have a bunch of vultures eating it up?
Something like during the winter here, we'll get a northeaster, and the wind will blow water, and we've all seen it, where all of a sudden, between your first and second floor, you've got the tile, or not the roof, the ceiling, and you see water marks, the rust marks from the nails. Mm-hmm. Okay, now normally people go out, they get bullseye, they paint it over, they get new ceiling paint, problem solved.
How quickly does rust form? It takes more than 2 days.
Yes.
If you see rust, you've had moisture more than 2 days.
Right.
So that means that proximal or up above, where you see the evidence, it could be visible mold, it could be the rust mark. Good example. But if you look above, what is growing there?
Now, what does somebody do? Because, like, my kitchen has a hard ceiling. If it was tiles, I can pop the tiles, stick my head up there and look. But I've got a plywood floor on the second floor.